Mesa Verde, southwestern Colorado. Land of rugged canyons, soaring mesas, and some of America's most stunning prehistoric ruins. Yet ever since these abandoned villages were first discovered in the late 19th century, they've puzzled visitors and archaeologists.
Pretty incredible, huh? Can you imagine building something like this on the face of a cliff and actually living up here? Hi, I'm Josh Bernstein, and the American Southwest is my home. But I've never gotten to the bottom of its most fascinating mystery until now.
Why did the Anasazi decide to move to the cliffsides? And why would they then abandon this entire region only decades later, never to return? These questions are at the heart of a debate now raging between archaeologists and Native Americans. At stake is the traditional image of the peaceful Anasazi. Everyone agrees that's how they began. The people who became known as the Anasazi started to farm this area of the American Southwest as early as 1 AD. For most of their history, they lived in small, scattered villages on the mesas and in the valleys. But in the middle of the 13th century, something happened. The Anasazi began to cluster together. They built high walls around their settlements, or took the precarious step of moving whole villages onto the cliffsides. Then, fewer than 50 years later, they abandoned these homes too, leaving behind most of their possessions, as if they planned to return. Instead, they seemed to disappear from history. Were the Anasazi invaded by another tribe? Or did they succumb to drought? Why did this complex and far-reaching civilization suddenly collapse? What happened? My exploration begins with Larissa Kumawana, a ranger at Mesa Verde National Park. In addition to her years teaching people about these ruins, Larissa is also a member of the Hopi tribe. The Hopi claim the Anasazi are their ancestors, and Larissa's insights may point me in the right direction.
So there's no running rivers, no streams in the bottom of any of these canyons. So their main water source would have been seep springs.
So there's no water down there?
No water
down
there.
The only water would be
in the back of these alcoves here. It is why it's thought that's the reason why the transition happened, you know, from the mesa top sites down into these cliff dwellings. You got the water source right there. Why not build closer to them?
Larissa's answer was practical, but I felt it avoided an important question. The Anasazi could have accessed these seep springs without living on the faces of these cliffs. Why subject an entire community to such exposure and risk? Many archaeologists now think that the ancient Anasazi had a darker side, marked by massacres and even cannibalism. Could violence explain the move to the cliffs? The cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde are certainly impressive, but there are hundreds of other sites throughout this region. Perhaps seeing some other dwellings would give me greater insights into why the Anasazi made such a drastic move. This part of the Southwest is known as the Four Corners, the place where Arizona, Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico come together. It was the heart of the Anasazi homeland for more than 1,000 years.
This is fun flying with the open air, because you get to feel like you're actually just flying up here.
Today, most of this region is covered with forests of pinyon pine and juniper. Yet 900 years ago, it was full of fields of corn, squash, and beans. Archaeologists believe the Anasazi supported 40 to 50,000 people in this area. Perhaps Larissa was right. Perhaps some of the Anasazi's water sources dried out, forcing them toward the seep springs. I'm imagining what it must have been like to move off the tops of the mesas and onto the sides of the cliffs. Talk about living on the edge. Think of the children and elderly on these cliff faces. And they did this throughout the Four Corners region. even in some of the most remote and desolate canyons. Why would the Anasazi make such a change? Take such a risk? What could these massive stone walls offer them to make the move worthwhile? To answer these questions, I need to get my feet back on solid ground, where I can hike and explore some of the more isolated cliff dwellings. At Mesa Verde, I learned that Native Americans believe the cause was drought. But some archaeologists think it's a lot more complicated and violent.
Look up above, the large spiral.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's an incredible spiral. You know, it's a really large one. Pigment's still in pretty good shape.
You have a sense of what that meant?
The spiral?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of different stories.
Yeah, you know, Hopis and people who claim ancestral heritage here have, you know, meanings to it. You know, it might be in a migration or their people. Or this could just be the marker of these people at this site, saying, you know, this is us, we're here.
Well, the dwelling's just over here this way.
Yeah, let's go down and have a look at the best part. We're coming right out to the edge of this ledge, you know, which starts getting that kind of defensive nature. A wall here.
And a good view of the tower.
Greenery there, corn cobs still in the greenery.
You can see the corn cobs.
Yeah.
This is incredible. This is amazing. These corn cobs are over 800 years old, and they're still here as if they were left just yesterday. Unbelievable.
We're coming right out to the edge of this ledge. This is my favorite part of this particular site. This little end ruin. All the rock art images on this whole wall. It's a large panel. We have bear tracks and mountain lion tracks. You've got this bighorn sheep down here. Anthropomorphic figures. Big, long zigzag that comes across this whole entire wall panel.
Oh, wow. And here she is.
Yep, this is kind of the jewel at the end of the trail.
Honey, I'm home. Wow. We came down all the way back there.
Yeah.
But why live here? Why build this here? I see the tower, right, which we saw on the way down. I guess it's the view. This is, I mean, it's a stunning view, but you know, the question that what I don't get is, this isn't easy. You know, they had to bring these rocks here, if not break them from the wall, and there's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So why? You know, why live here? Why bring their babies and their grandchildren to such a precarious location and live their lives here?
Because something's going on that's forcing them into these kind of situations.
And you think that it was warfare or
well, there was
tribal
certainly strife
unrest,
going on.
yeah.
There had to have been something to get people to have to bring their living up into these kind of places. Mm-hmm. You know, out on ledges. You know, you've got huge drop-offs right out from your doorway.
You can't really see.
You have to mix mortar, get water up here to mix all this mortar to put these stones together. It's just an amazing amount of effort, and it's not easy. As you can see, the closest water here is down in the canyon bottom.
What are these holes?
They're called loopholes.
What are they seeing? This one shows me basically that big rock.
Yeah, which could be a route of people coming up into this site. So if you start looking at these, they're called loopholes. If you start looking through them, a lot of times along walls, they point in different directions and show you things happening. So some people would call this a very defensive posturing type of aspect to this architecture. You know, it could be, you could be looking at your water, you could be looking at a ledge where somebody might come across to come into your site, possibly to attack you, whatever. So some people interpret these as another kind of defensive type of posturing in these loopholed walls. You know, this is kind of the last structure on this whole ledge system. You know, is this the final holdout right here? We don't know. And I'd like to stay longer. The sun's starting to head down over the canyon rim, and we probably ought to start heading out of here.
The Anasazi's hideaway definitely felt like an outpost or watchtower. But what were they watching for? Vaughn says that their most likely enemy, the Navajo, didn't come to this area for at least another 100 years. In fact, there doesn't seem to be evidence of any other tribes around here in the 13th century. So who was the enemy? I need to find out what was happening to the Anasazi before they moved into the cliffs. It's time to visit an old friend. He's a developer near Cortez, Colorado, just down the road from Mesa Verde. There's no bigger enthusiast about the Anasazi. He's found hundreds of ruins on his land, entire villages where the Indians lived before they took to the cliffs.
Hi, Josh, how are you?
Hi, Archie.
Good to be back. Great.
You guys have been busy.
Oh, we sure have.
His name is Archie Hansen.
I'll show you what we're doing. You haven't
He's
seen
uncovered
this.
some pretty incredible evidence which could explain what drove the Anasazi to take refuge.
A lot of new sites.
A lot of them, and we've done a lot of work here.
How many are you at right now?
Well, we're up to about 215 sites across the property right now. And you can come out and
Archie's prize site is this partially reconstructed pueblo that probably housed about 20 people, or 4 families.
way over there in that kiva. So we have quite a network.
It was occupied continuously from around 650 to 1150 AD. One of the most fascinating things Archie's found is a maze of tunnels that connect the communal rooms, or kivas, with the other living areas. And I've just got to explore where they go. But I find out the hard way how small these people were. The men were about 5'4", the women only 5 feet tall.
Tight squeeze, Arch.
At 6 feet and 180 pounds, I can barely squeeze through. And this is only the beginning of what Archie's excavations have uncovered.
Look at all these pot shards. Look at this. And can you imagine finding this many pot shards? And this is just a small tray sample. Look at these, look at this. Look at this corrugated pot. You can imagine finding that, not just on the trail, but on your own property. It's stunning. I would be excited. I'd be excited if I just found this piece. But he's got buckets and buckets and buckets and buckets. Look at all these studies. Macrobotanical remains, bioarchaeology of disarticulated remains, faunal remains, disturbed sites. He's invested so much time, and the benefit is that all of us get a much clearer picture of who the Anasazi really were.
And what Archie and his team of archaeologists have found is far from the traditional image of the peaceful Anasazi.
More company.